Have you wanted to learn more about philosophy and spirituality but felt intimidated by ancient Greek or Sanskrit? Is it too embarrassing to admit that we are more than the body? Are you afraid to bring up reincarnation over coffee? Well, we love coffee, and Plato, Buddhism, and Sri Ramana Maharshi. And we think these teachers and systems have some use today. This is the Beware How program, Mystic Philosophy Made Practical. I'm Bob, speaking weekly with Scott and Ryan. We're three conscious creatives and formerly closeted mystics trying to unpack the inaccessible. According to the mystics, the truth cannot be spoken, but we'll try to talk about it anyway. Hello, I'm Bob, and this is the Beware How program, speaking with Scott and Ryan. Today is Monday, May 18th, and we're done with the definition episodes. Maybe I won't be out of breath after these. Okay, I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to move on. Cut that. The format of this program is based on 3 acts. Personal realizations around this material is the opening. And then we move into some context around philosophy or concept associated with the topic. And then closing with practical application of. We want it to be useful. So that said, today's topic is the afterlife, death and the afterlife. The subtitle that I came up with was Dust, Hell, and Reincarnation, or Dust, Hell, or Reincarnation. Who's right really is the question. Seinfeld has this joke where you go up to heaven and there's several people who recently died at the gates, and St. Paul is like, the Mormons, Mormonism is the true religion. It's like, the non-Mormons are bummed out.
There's just like a wheel of fortune up there,
right,
like, to see who's right.
Just kind of how institutional, Orthodox religion treats this subject as, it's mine or no one else's only, which is just...
Yeah, it's such a big question
comedy.
that people get really, I don't know what the word is. People get serious and, caught up in who's right. It's such a big question that people really, really want to be right about it.
Yeah,
so,
and I think
a lot of contention.
A decent theme already, even in the first 5 episodes, but beyond the show is going to be kind of pointing at calling out people that, by my team and no one else's team crowd. Which we'll get into. What do you guys want done with your body? Do you want to be buried or cremated or a tree or what?
I like the idea of being cremated and buried with a tree. It sounds nice.
Yeah, cremation sounds
Which is
good
a
to me.
great segue into this ad that we have to read, which is...
This episode is sponsored by O'Houlihan's Tree Urns. Don't wind up in a box. When you die, let O'Houlihan's Tree Urns turn you into the tree of your choice. O'Houlihan's Tree Urns. Swap a wooden box for a beautiful tree. Head to O'Houlihan's.com and turn your corpse into an orchard.
That's the business.
I just want to look at the marketing materials for those tree body companies. Like they're very like Aronofsky, like it's like the fountain kind of visuals.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very mystic way to process your remains for sure.
It's extremely like mystic tech Buddhist. Like it's so sick. The tree thing. I think I'll go with the tree thing. I wrote cremated, but that's that's before the tree thing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a part of the
Be a
process.
tree.
It's the first step.
But then what if your family is like drinking lemonade under you, and then you get struck by lightning and burn, your tree dies in front of your family, so you double die.
That's rough.
Like they just buried you, you became a tree, and then 10 years later
You don't make it.
Yeah.
yeah, your tree doesn't make it.
Yeah.
you could kind of like hedge your bet and like spread around in like a few different orchards or something around the world, you know, just to like in case a hurricane wipes out one side, you still got your.
There you go.
Like your arm
legs.
was the tree of this one, and then your leg was of another.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, different limbs in different orchards. Yeah,
different parts of you create different types of trees: sycamores, orange trees.
And in order to keep them alive, this next ad is brought to you by Miracle Grow.
Yes. Yes. It is a miracle, truly.
Is your dead dad's tree not flowering this year? Miracle Grow.
Oh man, Mystic Miracle Grow.
Well, I hate cemeteries. I think to segue into like the personal side of this, I think they're so stupid. Like they're just so pointless. And you know, it's not even that they're creepy. Like some people are like, I hate cemeteries because they're creepy and like they remind me of death, obviously. But it's just they're pointless. Like the mystics say we're not the body. And like to have just fields like in East Austin, there's so many cemeteries. And they could be like parks or, you know, like water featured things or, you know, development, whatever. But they're just like, there's just stones marking people who are no longer in those bodies. I don't know. As someone that leans heavy reincarnation, it's like, it's just so bizarre to me to have all these, you know, gravestones all around this part of town.
I mean, I think it's a place for people to, you know, mourn and to like come back and remember that person. And especially when it's a place where a lot of people are like able to do that, you know, I think it provides a space for that.
You're right.
What do you propose, you know, if we didn't have cemeteries, how would you, where would all of your family, I mean,
tree body forests.
Would it just be forests? Yeah. Forests of tree bodies.
Yeah. Tree body orchards.
I mean, that sounds pretty great.
It's
yeah. I mean, you could still even call it a
cemetery.
It would just be like it'd be like an eco-friendly cemetery that you can still use as a park, essentially. But that you could, you know, still go visit. You know, visit the memory of your past loved one.
Do you think that grandchildren of one person would be like, "Hey, you took my grandpa's oranges," because, you know, like.
It starts a new religious war.
It's a very possessive of like the tree's fruits.
Also, like, did Grandpa choose an orange tree, you know?
Yeah, when you sign the paper for O'Houlihan's tree bodies,
you get to pick.
Select tree fruit type.
I see.
Organ donor, yes, no. Fruit selection, yes, you know. No, you're right. I think there is definitely a you know, sacredness to remembering and ancestors and the movie Coco. Just probably that one movie is like the best answer to like why we do need cemeteries or why we do need some way to honor the generations who came before us. Yeah, it just feels antiquated.
Sure,
that's all.
Totally.
Yeah,
I like the idea.
I had a new
cemetery forests.
Sorry, right? Yeah, I had a new respect for cemeteries after visiting London a few years ago. Went with a few friends, and we just like happened to stumble onto one of the cemeteries that's like deep in the city, because it, you know, many years ago when they built it, I guess it was on the edges, but now it's like deep in the heart of the city, and it's like one of the most beautiful green spaces I've ever been to. It's like, and they fully integrate, you know, life into it. People walk their dogs, people go and, you know, lounge. It's like, and it was beautiful. It's like this overgrown, like it's so old that you see these old, like Celtic symbols on certain stones. And I was like, okay, this is cool. This I can get into, not the like American drive through like a giant field of, you know, it's just a little different vibe, I guess, but
yeah, that's huge. I think making it an enjoyable space that honors the people, but doesn't have to like carry the dead weight of, the dreariness and the heaviness. And part of it probably does have to do with like the American kind of Christian conception of dead and dying, and scientific materialism too, of like the dust crew. I mean, we're kind of, America is like you're dust or you're in heaven or hell. And I think the alternative read, which is reincarnation or, kind of astral components to coming and going that are more prevalent in the East, there's not as much of there's still grief, obviously, but there's lighter aspects to it than the heaviness of American kind of black suit and just sobbing people and the hearse and I don't know, just the whole everything ceremonially about death and the afterlife in America is just kind of outdated to me.
I can see
I'm
that.
not saying be happy, but I like those like celebration of life things.
Yeah, same here.
When people party a bit more than the sobbing. That's what I want. I want to be a tree body, but I also want a rager. Which is, I think we got to talk about our experiences before we jump into like the different academic concepts of what different cultures talk about death and afterlife. When I was a kid, I lost several people in like a short period of time. And it was it was just a crazy like year. It was my grandpa, was my step grandpa, but my one grandpa that I knew, he had a heart attack on our kitchen floor, and I called 911 as a 9-year-old and like ran out to the front of the street to like flag down the ambulance. And that was his way out. He didn't recover from that.
Wow.
And then my grandma committed suicide, actually, not long after that, on the other side of the family.
Wow.
About 6 months later, 9 months later, something like that. And my dad's fiance, who was basically my stepmom, she died a month later after Gammy from pneumonia complications. So it was rough for us. Dad lost his mom and fiance in like 30 days.
Wow.
So it was crazy. I mean, it was an extremely contemplative period. And, there's something about death that just makes you just have to get introspective. It's just such a mystery. And so I think just being a young kid, and obviously there were people that I've met and I know of that, lost parents young, which is like just insane. Like, I don't know how human beings actually like survive without, strong family units and immediate family.
Yeah.
So I didn't, my story isn't quite that extreme. A lot of people lose people, but that was my kind of childhood. And like when you see that, my cousin died a few years after that, my one cousin. And so, that had to contribute for me in reading like Buddhism books and things like that, like as a younger guy. It just jostles you out of your paradigm,
Yeah.
Like, who'd y'all lose?
Ryan?
Let's see.
Sorry, I feel like y'all were going to say something then
No, yeah. I didn't. Almost all my grandparents are still alive. Fortunately, I've only lost one.
Yeah, that's wild to me.
And I wasn't super.
Because you're 30.
Close with her. Yeah. So I haven't. I've been fortunate up until now, and but I do remember in high school I had multiple friends pass away throughout middle school and high school. Lots of different reasons, but I mean, I can think of 4 at least. Usually like car accidents and things like that. And I remember that being extremely difficult. People that I was like pretty close to. And I think having the first time kind of having that feeling of knowing that someone's kind of gone forever, you know, like you don't get to talk to them again. And that was, you know, being in middle school, high school is like a pretty heavy thing to process. But other than that, yeah, especially a lot of the adult figures in my life, fortunately, are still around. So,
Wow. Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate too. It wasn't until my mid-20s that I, you know, lost someone who I had spent a significant amount of time around. I mean, it's as far as family. I definitely had some friends that passed away before that, but that, you know, it was my grandpa who, it was the first time that, you know, it took a toll, and that was mid-20s. So I felt very fortunate to have not had to go through something really, you know, brutal like that when I was younger. But we did at the same time, we kind of had, I was always aware, even though it didn't hit me real hard emotionally, because I wasn't alive yet. My grandma passed away, unfortunately through like violence. It was like she was a hostage in like a prison siege and ended up dying in that when my dad was young. And
Wow.
yeah, this is in Huntsville in a prison. It was kind of like a famous case when it happened. But so my dad was in his early 20s when he lost his mom to violence, and I can't even imagine what that's like to go through. But we, you know, so I just grew up
yeah.
hearing my dad and his siblings talk about their mom, you know, because they wanted to keep her memory alive. And I had kind of a strong memory as a kid of my aunt, my dad's sister, talking about how, you know, she would wake up in the middle of the night and see her mom standing at the foot of her bed, and her mom would tickle her toes, she said. And this was, you know, when she was an adult. She said she has like several memories of just like these kind of dream state memories of her mom visiting her. And, you know, I was a little
Wow.
kid when she
That's
said
awesome.
that, and I got scared and freaked out at the time because I was a little kid, and I was spooked by, but yeah, but it was like kind of her, I felt like my grandma's, like presence has been, with us, you know, since I was a little kid, just because everyone was always talking about her. And yeah, so that was my little glimpse that I got.
Oh, that's special.
That's amazing.
Yeah, there's something to also little children and their kind of intuitive capabilities, and I don't know if this is this episode or another one or why I have to care which episode it's for, but you know, I mean the Ian Stevenson material, this Dr. Stevenson, the University of West Virginia, or I'm sorry, University of Virginia professor who studied reincarnation in a clinical setting. Well, how do you do that? Well, you interview little children that claim to remember the previous existence, and it's a very common phenomenon now, especially as this has kind of gotten more momentum thanks to his research and his team members' research. But you know, there were little kids that would be speaking other languages of, you know, thousands of miles away, you know, that they wouldn't have never been exposed to that culture in this, you know, incarnation, in this manifestation.
Yeah.
And well, why is that? Well, the mystics say, and this is, you know, kind of getting into the astral stuff, but there's the forgetting isn't complete, I guess you could say. You know, there's still that the memory is stronger of the previous existence, or of a, you know, inhabiting higher realms when you're little, when you're like the sweet spot is like 2 to 4 because they can talk, but they haven't been, you know, kind of re-educated, so to speak, in this cultural paradigm. So so that doesn't surprise me. I mean, I feel like I see stuff all the time about like little kids. There's a famous one of a little American boy who he drew planes that were on fire like every day, and his mom was like, the hell's wrong? You know, like, this is bad. This is troubling. Like, he's just always drawing people dying in the ocean and fiery planes. Like, what the hell's going on? Well, he started talking about some unit of the Air Force and some particular plane even. You know, maybe I can find it, actually.
It's amazing.
I want to just riff on it while I look for it. Okay, here we go. James Lininger had nightmares about being a World War II pilot who died after his plane crashed into the ocean. He talked in his dreams. He found out he was James Houston, and eventually described his death. There's a lot online about this because they went to CBS News, and they found this guy's friend. Anyway, there's all kinds of stories like this of like a little kid talking, you know, and I think what we tend to do is just be like, oh, kids are crazy. They saw it on, you know, some movie or, you know, whatever, and then just to be dismissive of it. But it's like, no, like, encourage, you know, the concentration on that kind of stuff. It's super interesting.
Yeah.
Because they might be holding on, I think most importantly, they might actually be holding on to a traumatic memory that, you know, their liberation from will be extremely helpful.
Sure.
And useful for them.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm not a reincarnationist or anything, but here's 4 minutes riffing on that. Which, you know, I mean, this stuff isn't new. These ideas of kind of astral travel, Pythagoras really is the oldest philosopher, one of the oldest Greek philosophers. He's pre-Socratic. I guess that's how big of a deal Socrates was. They have pre-Socratic and post-Socratic Greek philosophy. But Pythagoras, one of his ideas, in addition to, you know, being a G at geometry, was in Love and Triangles, was he also talked about metempsychosis. I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation, but metempsychosis is transmigration of the soul, which Plato kind of took and ran with. But that was from Pythagoras, and that's really kind of a competing school to Aristotle's tabula rasa, which means blank slate, which is kind of what, you know, is the scientific material view, and the modern day American kind of psychology view, child psychology view, is tabula rasa, blank slate, that the child is born, you know, kind of square one, that there's no, you know, nothing lingering from a previous existence. And so, yeah, so it's been around for a while that the soul continues and goes through, and that's just the Greeks. I mean, you have, you know, obviously the Hindus and the Buddhists are both reincarnationists who believe we've had thousands of lifetimes, thousands upon existences. You know, we're just constantly going through this wheel, this larger cycle of, you know, this awakening process is just a series of lifetimes, and your uniqueness is your own life stream of the variety of existences that you've been in. And that one makes some sense to me. I mean, especially coming out of the consciousness is fundamental explanation world with Gover in the metaphysical episode and these kind of quantum physics discoveries, but you know, even just Yogananda writing about this stuff. Yogananda is like, look, we've all been rich, we've all been poor, you know, we've all been ugly, we've all been beautiful, we've all been famous, we've all been, you know, unknowns. Don't get caught, basically. Don't get trapped in all of these external aspects of this world, of your incarnation's role in this world. You know, it's just an act. You're an actor in the role, and they're very alluring, all these different components of it, and that's true. But the whole thing really lightens up quite a bit as you kind of come into that point of view.
Yeah, it sounds similar to some of the non-duality stuff we were talking about, and just impermanence.
Yeah, and if you're getting attached to form, it's like that's going to be the form that you're absolutely the most attached to, is your body, the thing that's keeping you alive and moving around. And it's like, why wouldn't you? It's like you're so dependent on it in this life, and so the idea of losing it is could be horrifying to you if you are so, if you truly believe that that's
if
all
you're
you
so
are.
identified with it, if that's what you are.
Yeah.
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 A course calls the body the ego's masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is. It's the separate, the perfect representation of separateness. That is so confining. St. Francis called it brother donkey, or like brother ass. Like it's just trudging on through, I guess, is kind of the image, but it's not what you are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I think those views help with death, and help, certainly more so than thinking that you're dust and you crumble into the soil. Sorry, I feel like I'm interrupting you guys. Were you going to say something, Scott?
I was just kind of continuing what you were talking about. I think, I like that though, the masterpiece of the ego. It's just, the body is going to be like the last hardest thing to let go of. And you start to get that fear, especially if you have like health issues, and you start to feel like confined by your body because it's not working in some way or another. And like, that can quickly, just send you down like a rabbit hole of anxiety and all this stuff. And I don't know. Those are moments when I enjoy remembering that that there's a difference between my mind and my brain, and that in my view, the brain is filtering a much larger mind that will be free to do other things once the brain stops. And that's a comforting thought for me that I keep seeing evidence of in all these various things we talk about. So I like it when I see little hints and glimpses of that fact that my mind has other things going on besides being filtered by this little noggin.
Yeah, I liked that in that material too. Like to add to your point there about, kind of again, the consciousness is fundamental crowd. It was like even neuroscientists acknowledge that the brain doesn't create consciousness. Even Sam Harris says that, who is kind of, the defining atheist neuroscientist voice in American culture today. He agrees that the brain doesn't create consciousness. And so that's a huge misconception by the mainstream, just mainstream society, that the brain, we're born, the brain has consciousness, then it loses it, we get dementia or whatever, and then you die, and that, so it's linked to the brain. And it's so important to make that distinction, that the brain is the filter, or kind of the Yogananda imagery. It's the lamp that holds the electricity.
Yeah, the TV set that holds the signal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The music is still going, whether the radio's on or off.
Yeah. And it is just so counterintuitive though. And like, like the examples Gober gives is, if someone gets like brain damage, for example, that affects their consciousness. And so and it would be, hard to blame someone for assuming from that they are causally, but that's one of the things you learn is correlation doesn't mean causation. They're definitely correlated, not necessarily causally related. And one of the things that Gober mentions is the example of when people have NDEs, near-death experiences, their memory of what they were experiencing is apparently very, very vivid for a lot of them, even though brain activity has dropped off. So how could you explain like an intensifying of an experience with lesser brain activity? And like that's just one of those little things that
or almost
hints.
None whatsoever. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, that it hints at something else. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but you're right. I mean, I think it is important to call out, like, if a particular lobe is damaged, your cognitive ability will, be consequently affected by that area. We know what lobes correspond to what aspects of rational thinking and memory and sensation. And, the machine works. But, just because the radio is busted on the left speaker doesn't mean that the track, isn't stereo, I guess is the point, right?
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'd love to talk about NDEs. I was going to mention that my grandpa, who died of a heart attack, Grandpa Jack, he had an NDE and told me about it when I was a little kid. Before he, had his ultimate departure, he had a couple heart attacks before that, and one of them, he was a bailiff in courthouses, and respect, shout out to Grandpa Jack. He was my grandpa, the only one that I knew, and he was a great guy, and could build and fix anything. And I am a fraction of the man you are, Jack Greer. Although I'm getting better because now I live in a house, and my wife asked me to fix things, and I'm batting about 500 right now.
YouTube video, how to fix this.
Right. Yeah, I don't use YouTube ever. But Jack had a heart attack when he was in the courthouse, like in a trial. And the judge called the guy in, and they took him out to the hospital, and the judge famously said, "Oh, he's dead and gone." And he came back to life in the hospital. And I don't remember how long he was out, but he didn't have a pulse. And, for a couple minutes, you can't have not a pulse for too long. But he described to me what was, he basically kind of walked into this cabin, and he saw his father. And his dad had been dead for decades upon decades. And his dad looked younger. I think the reason I remember this is because it was such a vivid image of him being as old as he was, seeing his father, who was like 30s, 40s when he died, and seeing his dad kind of at that age. And, short conversation with him in this cabin, and woke up and was in the hospital.
Wow.
And so I remember hearing that when I was a little kid, and that was interesting. That's cool. And there's, and that's just such a short snippet, because we have much fuller accounts these days. One in particular that I really like is called Embraced by the Light, by Betty Eadie. But there's a lot. Eben Alexander is a neuroscientist, speaking of neuroscientists, who are neurologists, but he had an NDE as well, and it was also fantastical. There are tens of thousands of these things, NDEs, near-death experience, I should clarify, where, people die and they kind of see their body. There's a common threads, and they're all very mystical, and, they sound like almost like shamanic kind of vision quests and things like that. But, you see your body, you see your mourning family members, and you have this capacity to travel very quickly, and then you typically go up. You sometimes go through a tunnel. There's a lot of tunnel imagery in these accounts, and there's a light at the end of it. I mean, to be cliche, but there's like a void. I mean, Betty Eadie, it's a whole book about hers,
and she explains every facet, and like there's this black void, but she felt other souls in there, but it wasn't hell and it wasn't evil, but it was this comforting void. But she kept going, and there's like stages of it all. And she eventually made contact with the light, capital L. She was a Christian, so she said it was Jesus, but she made the disclaimer that it's whoever your kind of deity is. It's whoever your manifestation of is, that entity which kind of greets you, so to speak, in between physical sheaths. And she recorded the conversation that she had with kind of emanating light Christ, ancient friend, ancient, loving teacher, all these things, oneness itself. And it's a great book, but there's a whole, it's like a genre, it's like there's a lot of these that happen, and I think we don't, as a just American society in particular, there's no real mechanisms in psychotherapy or the hospital, certainly not in the hospital system, but really not even in like counseling necessarily, that equip people to process these kinds of experiences. And thankfully, I think thanks to a couple of best-selling books, it's starting to become a little more commonplace that this is a thing. But and these are very cool. I'm real into them.
Yeah, I personally have never experienced one, but I've heard a lot of really amazing stories. A lot of really similar themes throughout all of them, which makes you wonder. It reminds me of a book also. I guess it's a little bit more on the topic of reincarnation, but there's another book called Many Lives, Many Masters. I don't remember the author. I read it years ago, and she's basically a psychotherapist and starts realizing that there's actually, I think she was working with hypnosis. I'm pretty sure, and she was realizing that she had patients that were that had these like highly detailed stories of them as another person under hypnosis, and so she started to explore that and wrote a whole book about it, and it's really fascinating stuff.
Very cool. Sarah was telling me about that a couple years ago, that book.
Yep.
So cool.
I'm glad you haven't personally had an NDE, Ryan, or any of us.
Yeah. Thanks for the disclaimer, though.
Yeah. I mean, you meet people. I've met a handful of people that have had that. They
really
powerful experience.
The kind of baseline, is like you see. I mean, you hear it's a cliche, but you see your life flash before your eyes. You see a series of images from when you were young all the way up until now, kind of all these moments that especially like kind of defining moments,
life review,
and I've met at least 2 or 3 people that have told me that exact same thing. They've had those experiences, and it's amazing that those, it's a similar experience for a lot of people. I also, I didn't read the article. I just saw an article, I think, on my phone this morning. There's a new study that has linked NDEs, like themes within NDEs, to the same experiences that you have under DMT.
DMT.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, for me, I was like, well, duh, like that makes a lot of sense. But it's really cool that's like kind of being studied now.
Well, that's an interesting point. You just beat me to it, because what my atheist pal would tell me when I would bring up NDEs was, when you die, your brain starts to release the organic DMT version,
right,
that we have in our synapses, and they fire, and big deal. It's kind of explaining any astral components away with biochemical processes. And, you know, that's fine. There always has to be like a Darwinist counterpoint, you know? It's like
Sure.
there has to be one, or else it's no fun. But
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean,
what I would
no,
say to that is,
I like visiting
Go
those
ahead.
points too.
Yeah.
It's my mind goes there too of like what would the skeptic say to that, just because that I enjoy that interplay of that discussion. And yeah, and it's like, this can't, the point isn't that it's proof, because if you're searching for proof, you're missing something, and it does come down to a belief, but yeah, I've heard that too of, oh, it's like the last dream of your faulty machinery brain shutting off, and that, that's a way to explain it in the physical
Taking
world.
you out with a
And
trip
you can rest
that's
on that.
pleasurable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I get that, but yeah, it just comes down to each person, like how you're going to interpret what happens. And the more I sit on it and think on it, the more it just feels like not enough of an explanation. The simple, like, chemical explanation.
Yeah. Betty Eadie says, like, she's like, I'm not a theologian. There's no way that I could have written all this, kind of thing, like, which is a pretty good argument for the experience.
Yeah.
And kind of same with Helen Schuckman. And of course, and, when people kind of download information like this or have those kinds of experiences that, exceed beyond any reasonable explanation for their own, IQ or cognitive capacity or whatever, that's a pretty good argument. But also,
Yeah.
I'm on that right now, indierf.org, Near Death Experience Research Foundation. Shout out.
Nice.
There's tens of thousands on here. And what I would say is, and I haven't dug through these enough to make the point, but I think, if there is a counterpoint to the DMT, it's explaining away thing is, sometimes in Embraced by the Light, she explained things that were happening that while she was out. I mean, that's, to me, the kicker on the DMT, getting beyond that one, because if you can see the nurses and hear their conversation, I think I even brought that up to this friend in particular that I'm thinking of. He's like, well, she heard what the nurses were saying about her when she was out. And he's like, well, that's because her ears were nearby, It's just like, yeah, true, okay. So it would really get proved if she, saw some event outside of the hospital, I guess, and then came back and was able to recall that. So,
Yeah.
If you know of any NDE evidence, hit us up in the comments for some revelations.
There always has to be a skeptic's way out,
because
if you, like you said, the point is that eventually you're going to have to make a jump, and even though there's like mounting evidence that pushes against that, that intuition of, oh, the brain is the mind, we're told it, and we are kind of implicitly we're told it since a kid, and so it's just so hard graded in. And even when things present themselves that we're like, wait a minute, that's not the complete picture, there still needs to be, that skeptic's refuge to come back. Oh, I can explain it, and that has to be there. But yeah, it's like, if you look in the right direction, you'll just see this mountain of indicators that suggest other things. But yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
All.
Yeah. I think it's we're never going to get like a Google News update notification that their metaphysics is, peer-to-peer reviewed, and everybody just has faith you're right, like that's not how it works. And so I think what I would say too to that, and like this is getting into the practical side of all this, like, the Buddhists are pretty indifferent about this stuff. The Thich Nhat Hanh school, particularly, Zen Buddhism, is really embraces the impermanence and the beauty of the transitory and kind of the preciousness of the moment. And, this role, this manifestation, regardless of continuation of consciousness or soul or whatever, this role will perish. Y'all's will, our listeners will, and that's beautiful. Live for today. I like to remind people often, maybe too often, uncomfortably, that we're all going to die. Like in meetings, at work. I mean, I remind people we're going to die with an almost like shut the fuck up kind of attitude. I want to be like a child, like an elementary school child, kind of level of repetitive annoyance with that fact. Because it's true, and it seems like we keep forgetting, or we don't acknowledge it, or we live our lives as though it won't end. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's a healthy reminder. I mean, as long as it's like mentioned with, a gratitude for life, not so much like you're going to die.
Irritating comedy.
Yeah. As long as it's not a threat.
It's not a threat. But it is an annoying irritation.
I always enjoyed
It's funny.
I assume it was Plato or Socrates defined philosophy as just preparation for death, and I've been into philosophy ever since.
Yeah, that's very Buddhist. Gosh, I can't remember the school. The problem when you listen to Ram Dass for so many years is that he references everything. He references secular, non-secular. He references Eastern, Western philosophy, spiritual, artists, professors. He references everyone. And so there's a couple of loose ends of his stuff that I can't place exactly, but I'm going to go with Buddhist. I think it's Tibetan Buddhist, but that's the similar thing. The whole practice is like the focus on the breath is so constant that the goal is to be in perfect stillness at the point of death, like kind of not to one up your Socrates thing, but like the whole thing is a preparation for death, for the moment of death. So you do it fully. So you're completely centered during it. And there's Hindu aspects too of like what you're doing when you die, like what you're thinking about when you die can carry on, like the Neem Karoli Baba stuff, the Maharaji stories. There's stories of him like helping people pass without being attached to something. Like, oh gosh, the story, it's coming to me, so just bear with me. But basically he wakes up in the middle of the night. He had this big dinner, and like Ram Dass is guru, and he wakes up in the middle of the night and he's like, hey, feed me. I need cook, I need some food. And like they start cooking them, and they're like, we had a big dinner, we ate or whatever. And he's like, no, I just need this dal and this rice and so they started cooking like kind of feverishly, and like he ate all this food, like so much food, more so than like it made sense at all. And then they all realized like a day or two later that one of his longest disciples was dying that night, and he was hungry and was like thinking of like food or thinking of like this particular dish, and like he wanted to free him of that. Like he wanted to kind of take that on, as far as to let his devotee not carry it with him.
Wow.
Into an astral. I mean, it's,
that's awesome.
Those guru stories are so fantastical, but yeah, that's related to the where you're at on the way out,
Yeah. Yeah, that it's a weird thing that made me think of it, but I got my last year I got my first tattoo, and it weirdly was like a reckoning that I'm gonna die moment. And it was strange because it was like getting past the fear of permanently tattooing something onto my body, and then examining that fear and being like, why am I trying to preserve this thing that's gonna disappear? And like, and then I started to see like my parents or just anyone's fear of a tattoo kind of being a fear of death, and like you don't want to look at the fact that your body isn't going to be around forever, so make of it what you will, kind of thing. I don't know, that was just this moment I had where I was like, I feel slightly more ready to die now after I've had my first tattoo. It was this very strange moment. I wasn't ready for that to be my reaction, but it was.
That's funny. It's like putting a bumper sticker on a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like, I'm not gonna have this car forever. This bumper sticker is gonna be on it. Yeah. Ryan's all inked up. You can't see his, but Ryan's full chest is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got that young too. It's like 19.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've gone.
Yeah, I waited till my 30s.
Yeah, gone back and forth on tattoos, but it's a really interesting transitory thought from tattoos to death.
Yeah, congrats on having pretty profound musings over not everyone's thinking about that.
But it's definitely a way to like kind of release your attachment to the body. I'd say that for sure.
Yeah, that's what I felt.
Yeah, it's like it seems like the spirit continues, but even if it doesn't, that's okay. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. In general, the idea of impermanence, I think, aligns with that. And like, I agree. Like, I believe that the idea of impermanence, like having that in your daily practice, is like so powerful. I mean, Kaylee and I talk about that a lot. Just recognizing the impermanence of things. And there's like so much like gratitude and humility that just like immediately naturally comes through when you really are aware of the impermanence of things. It's a really beautiful practice, and it's really powerful
because we just think it's gonna go forever, right? I mean, that's why how we live our lives is like, we'll get to it, or we'll kind of shore up all of these expectations about the future and try to grasp onto them all.
Yeah.
And it's all of those, the grasping is obstacles to enjoying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think impermanence too has like been especially prevalent lately with the pandemic. I mean, a lot of people are losing a lot of things, losing money, losing lives, losing jobs, and family. So it's been a really common topic, and I think it's good that people are kind of as terrible as like a lot of the loss is, but it's good to be reminded of impermanence. It really makes you grateful for what you have, and it's good practice.
Yeah, people are.
I'm glad you brought it up.
Change is terrifying.
Go ahead, Scott.
Just change is terrifying, and death represents the biggest change possible. So you kind of need to ease your toes in, however you can, whether that's through philosophy or any, just something that lets you start grappling with that big change.
Yep. It actually reminds me too of one of the practices for me anyways of like dealing with stress and anxiety. Like impermanence plays a huge role in that for me personally. I think so I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in 2017 and spent a couple years, 2.5 years, really, really struggling with it. I've been actually the end of May, in about 10 days will be my 6-month complete remission, which is super
Awesome.
Amazing.
yeah, super exciting. But a part of working with an autoimmune disease, a lot of them are deeply related to stress. And so just dealing with stress, learning how to manage stress, how to recognize stress, was a big part of that practice. And the idea of impermanence of any was like a huge role for me, because anything that was stressing me out, if I really were to just stop and take a deep breath and recognize the impermanence of any situation that I was in, whether it was a tough situation at work or whatever it is, but recognizing the impermanence of it, like this is not going to last forever. And even if it's like either like a moment that was difficult, or maybe a larger thing, that maybe something as big as like your job, like you maybe you hate your job and you're just, I think recognizing the impermanence of things it just changes your perspective. It makes you feel a lot better when you realize that not everything is going to last forever, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. If it's a bad thing, it's like, great, I feel better because this isn't gonna last forever. And if it's a good thing, it's like, great, I feel more gratitude because I know this thing isn't gonna last forever. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you shared that. And I think it'd be a really cool future app to do stress and like even like stress and health relationship.
Absolutely.
Maybe you and Jen could talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great, I think, for people, but also for me to learn from you.
Yeah.
What I was going to add to that was I'm a very social person, and I think the impermanence thing for me does deal a lot with like friendships and relationships, and like
Sure.
being 30, almost 31, 32, having like kind of phases of your life that are relationships with certain people, and then that changes, like your circles of people that are around you change. And that started to become apparent a few years ago. And then, obviously some of those people die, to Scott's point earlier. Now that when you're in your 30s, you start losing people that aren't your, grandparents, because humans die in their 20s and 30s in larger numbers. And so that's an aspect of it. But even just like working with people, like I've changed jobs a bunch, I guess. And, you have like your work crew, and then you change jobs, and like you never see all of those people again that you had a whole vibe with, and jokes and stories and like relationships. Now they're all on Facebook with you forever. But but that was, I think, what hit like strongly with me a few years ago, was like realizing that, the moments really that we spend with other people, there's only going to be so many of them with each person. So, really be present with them. Don't be thinking about anxious future and heavy past regret and future fears. And if you can strip those away, you could really be with the other person and really be with the other people fully, and share, more substantively, to encourage them or to learn from them, to experience their personalities and uniqueness more fully. So I think just as an extrovert, that's how I realize this stuff.
Totally.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good way to keep yourself from existing in not now, which we're so good at doing. It's
right.
Like you're, and that's one of the biggest, I don't know what's the word. It's like the biggest temptation to not live now is to think about that big ending moment when you do lose those people, and you do lose, this body and this life. And I've started to get the feeling that like every little fear or like bit of anger or something I have secretly has the little attachment of fear of death, like at the back end of it, and you just don't know it. Like it's like the sink is clogged and I'm gonna die. It's like always comes as like a little, and then and then if you can just like not worry about that other thing that's gonna happen later, like all of a sudden the here and now doesn't really bother you as much, and that was really the thing that was bothering you. I don't know. That's just my little feeling I've gotten about that lately.
That's great.
I'm sorry you're dealing with a constant gnawing.
No, it's not even that I'm that afraid or anything. It just
You're
like
just saying
it's
what's
just
underneath
this,
it. What's underneath it? What's
yeah,
underneath it?
yeah. I'm just trying to notice what the
That's
real
really funny.
thing is, and I just like, and it's not that I'm like maybe I am particularly
Concerned.
neurotic, but it just yeah, but it does. It just feels that way, and like I try to get at the base of those reactions. And
Should we
so
make shirts that say you're going to die? Is that too?
I was gonna suggest it, but I've already suggested too many shirts on the podcast, so I don't want to be the shirt guy.
They're
but,
great. Bewarehow.threadless.com. Go and buy You're Going to Die to remind yourself in the mirror and others of the inevitable crumbling of our body. The fact that we'll all be tree bodies in 100 years.
Yeah, and buy that shirt to make sure no one talks to you ever.
We'll all be an orchard in 100 years. We didn't talk about hell at all. Do we want to?
Oh yeah,
we're kind of towards the end.
That whole thing, yeah.
We were kind of like dust or reincarnation. Like we're kind of like, it's obviously not the Judgment Day thing,
right?
Guys.
That's kind of what I was just gonna say.
Yeah, dust or reincarnation seem to be the more likely ones. But if you were, I was talking to my dad about this topic recently, and what I was telling him was like, this was a thought that kind of comes out of like compassion meditation or like loving kindness meditation, where you just like, where you love everyone. It's a beautiful practice, and we'll talk about it in the Buddhist episode. But like Christian fundamentalists who want to save you from hell, that are warning you that you're going to burn. If I can strip back my reactive ego kind of offense taken, and the fact that I kind of disagree with them anymore theologically, if I can get rid of all of that, they want to save me from hell. That's really nice. Like, isn't that thoughtful? That's a thoughtful.
It's very thoughtful
thing.
Assuming that they're actually meaning that and not trying to be that weird like I'm saving you because I'm better than you. No, I know. Which I'm glad.
Well,
but yeah, it's easy to turn that into like a condescension. But you're right. That's the better way to interpret it.
But even if they were being condescending, they're still racking up points on saving. Hey. Like they still think they're saving. Even if they are being condescending, they're not like, this is all bullshit. They're still like, they're still being condescending, but they still actually think they are saving you from burning. So that's still a point towards them being nice and thoughtful as they yell about my sinning. And so I told my dad that, and my dad has a very Texas accent. He works with this guy who's a fundamentalist. And my dad even has a very Texas accent to where he says Monday and like Tuesday. Mm-hmm. He doesn't say the A sound. Yeah,
my mom's the same way.
Scott's family. So my dad can speak the language, even though he's like articulate and he's a wordsmith and he's written books, and he still kind of has this capacity. So his very fundamentalist boss, who's a really great guy. My dad was like, well, yeah, this came to me in meditation, and this is what we should do. Like, he just kind of dropped that one in the middle of like a work call, I guess. And his boss was like, what? He's like, I keep hearing about this. Like, what are you talking? What do you mean by meditation? And this is just an aside. And my dad goes, he goes, well, with praying, you're talking. And with meditating, you're listening.
Love it.
And I just love that as I try to write like 2,000 words about this stuff. Something about just being super succinct.
There's something about Texasisms that just gets right to the heart of the matter.
Right. With praying, you're talking. With meditating, you're listening. So yeah, so that I think that's as far as the fundamentalist camp, that guy in particular, super nice guy, super sweet guy. If you ain't going to church or baptized and all that stuff, you're gonna burn forever, according to this person, who's a extremely intelligent business owner. I mean, we're in America, so it's like everyone's like, yeah, that's 85% of the people that I know and hang out with. But yeah, that's a relic of, we went into the Bible scholarship stuff really heavy into Easter in the Easter episode, unraveling Christianity, or unpacking, whatever. But I did want to just mention that maybe we do hell in another one. I don't know. Maybe this is edit notes because we could do probably more on hell.
I mean, I was thinking. I could kind of like mention how I've always viewed like the concept of hell. I mean, there was something I think it was like the beginning of my spiritual practice when I moved to Austin, 9 years ago, and I kind of had this like realization. I don't know if it was through reading a certain book or what it was, but and this is coming from like growing up Christian, not fundamentalist Christian, so I was never really fed language of like you need to do this, otherwise you're going to hell. That was never a part of the dialogue for me, so there wasn't a huge pressure, but I kind of had this.
So it wasn't very effective, it sounds like.
Yeah. I kind of had this moment where I like was realizing that heaven and hell are kind of just states of mind. Heaven being a purely blissful, kind of enlightened, living in in your kind of your highest power and in pure happiness. Like that is a state of mind that you can achieve. And then hell is also a state of mind that you can achieve, which is like the exact opposite of that. It's like super pessimistic and negative and angry and blame, full of blame, and so that's how I just started kind of viewing heaven and hell. And I don't know if that resonates with anyone, but that's kind of what came to me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's Hindu stuff, by the way, and Buddhist stuff. I mean, that you've been in the ocean of Eastern mysticism for so long, it's hard to categorize kind of where it arises and where it doesn't. Similar to me. This is a story that Ram Dass loves. It's a Zen fable. He said, "A big tough samurai once went to see a little monk. 'Monk,' he said, in a voice accustomed to instant obedience, 'teach me about heaven and hell.' The monk looked up at this mighty warrior and replied with utter disdain, 'Teach you about heaven and hell? I couldn't teach you anything. You're dirty, you smell, your blade is rusty, you're a disgrace and an embarrassment to the samurai class. Get out of my sight. I can't stand you.' The samurai was furious. No one talks to a samurai like this, especially not this little monk. He shook up, got red in the face, speechless with rage. He pulled out his sword, raised it above the monk, preparing to cut off his head. Right before he did, the monk said calmly, 'That's hell.' The samurai was overwhelmed. The compassion and surrender of this little man who had practically just risked his life to give this teaching. He slowly put down his sword, filled with gratitude. He bowed in reverence and appreciation to the monk. And that's heaven." Yeah.
Yep. That sounds pretty spot on.
That's it. And, this book also for me is so huge. I read this in high school, The Mystic Christ by Ethan Walker III. He has a chapter on eternal damnation and hell. Basically, it's mystic Christianity and kind of universalism and stuff that we talk about on this show. And chapter 14 is eternal damnation and hell. I mean, to continue that point there,
that really is the Hindu view. Hatred makes the mind to hell, says Amachi. Likewise, anger, jealousy, and uncontrollable craving for name and fame make life equal to hell. You lose your peace of mind. You lose the love in you. All that's true. But what's great about this book is he really goes into, this is kind of for like Christians on the fence that are interested in learning more about, scholarship, but also paired with mysticism and spirituality. Because there's some New Testament scholarship that he does. In particular, the Hell chapter, he talks about how in the entire New Testament, the word hell appears 23 times, that kind of stuff, the numbers of words. And 15 of these were spoken by Jesus, translated from Koine Greek. The word was Gehenna, which is a landfill, basically. He only uses the word Hades a couple of times, which is 4 times, which is like hell, kind of Greek hell. Usually he says Gehenna. Well, what is Gehenna? Gehenna is, it's a dump. It's a foul pit on the outskirts of Jerusalem. It was, well known. A fire was often burning in it to consume garbage. It was, the stench of the smoke. It was just a very unpleasant place that everybody, his audience, all knew about. So when he's talking about hell and like how you'll be in hell, modern day American Christianity reads that as fiery devil land, but he was actually talking about a garbage dump,
right?
Which means, he wasn't actually saying that you're going to go to this garbage dump. He meant that purely figuratively, and mystic philosophy as a whole, I think, works with symbolic language and figurative language. That's parables and that's metaphor and all these things, and that's what Jesus did. He used parables. He was explaining the mustard seed and all these things. He was using symbolic imagery, and so it's a misstep to read the hell doctrine of Christian church, of you go and burn in a place literally, when it was a metaphoric illustration for a faulty state of mind.
Isn't the Gnostic interpretation a little bit like that we're the classic hell is more like the Greek Hades, but what's actually it means is just like a distance from God and illusion, which is essentially what we're in right now? And does that mean
the
that
Gnostics
the Gnostics
are really, you're in
this
it
to be hell? Yeah,
this is
you're
it.
in it.
Yeah. Delayed Skype calls on this podcast. Me syncing up Scott's audio on this edit.
Brought to you
hell.
by hell.
Yeah, no, it's there's the Gnostics are very astral plane, kind of Tibetan Buddhism and the Hiranyaloka chapter, which we didn't bring up, the Yogananda Hiranyaloka chapter. Maybe we'll do an autobiography episode and just go through that entire book, and that'll be the finale. But yeah, there's also definitely conceptions of, I guess to Ryan's point about hell is a state of mind, heaven is a state of mind, totally agree with that. And I'm glad you brought that up so directly, because, I think that's the mindful material, people. Yeah. That's secular, that's mindfulness, that's Thich Nhat Hanh. And then in the metaphysical scene, maybe there is some translating to, subtler bodies and things like that.
If you're of the opinion that consciousness is everything, then this reality is a state of mind, which can be heaven or hell, depending on how you're, walking through it, perceiving it, whatever. But yeah, no, I'm with Ryan. I think it is state of mind. And I mean, if you imagine yourself, your brain passes away and your mind opens up and is able to see everything you've done to everyone for your entire lifetime, and you have to play back any hurt you've caused other people, that sounds like hell to me. That would be terrible to have to walk through that. And like the judgment, maybe the judgment is just your own judgment of yourself, and you have to kind of walk through that. I think I even pulled that from a I love Neil Gaiman. I don't know if y'all know him. He's a sci-fi fantasy author, and he has this amazing short story where I assume it's supposed to be the afterlife. I'm gonna terribly paraphrase this, but this guy walks into a room and there's this cloaked demon that he sees across the room, and he's like, you're gonna have to walk through everything you've done in your life, and it's gonna be brutal. And then by the end of the short story, he is the demon, and he's seeing himself walk in, and he has to repeat the process. He's like, you have to relive everything, and it's just like it's like a nightmare. That's cool. It's like this self-reflective. If you've done a lot of bad stuff, it's gonna take a while to forgive yourself for all that, and so you're gonna be stuck in a way for a while until you can move past that. So I don't know. That's my analogy for the classic version.
Yeah, totally. That's also Time Crimes that remind me of, which is a film that's a similar plot of like, he's just the innocent guy at the beginning, and then he's like, there's a mysterious man that attacks the thing, but it's just him in a dimensional loop kind of thing.
That old classic switcheroo. No, I haven't seen that. That sounds good.
Caught in a loop. We're all caught in a loop. Yeah, that's samsara, baby.
I like the definition of heaven and hell being closeness to God and distance from God. I think that's totally spot on and accurate.
Yeah, which is an old Jewish proverb.
Yeah.
Well, we can't, I think to wrap it all up, this episode was brought to you by O'Houlihan's Tree Bodies. Go to o'houlihanstreebodies.com to register your future corpse as a tree. They didn't tell us the price, but check it out.
Is there a discount code?
Yeah, the discount code is BewareHow 2020 for 10% off. I couldn't get us any more. But just 10% off of your future tree body. It's only I think it's like $80,000. So it's like $8,000 off.
It's not bad, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Use our link and they'll throw in extra LED lights for your final showing.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks guys. I think I'm gonna have to edit this one a lot to clean it up, like the metaphysical one. I don't know if y'all seen the metaphysics episode, because it is, if you've watched it on YouTube, it's constantly it's me just going like this. Because I'm just cutting a few of the creative one. There's one cut. Mindful, there's 2 cuts, and then metaphysical one is just
well,
So this one might be like that, but I think we got somewhere good, and I definitely appreciate you guys traversing a heavy subject. I think some people might be like, "Ugh, death episode," but
no, we make it fun.
There's some good stuff to it, and if people were on the fence about how to bury their loved ones, they got a pretty good idea with this tree body situation.
Yep.
Yeah, welcome.
Hopefully we're gonna inspire some landscaper architect to design the next cemetery forest, hopefully.
Right. Like goth arborists. That's our target market.
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks guys.
Yeah.
We'll be in touch. I don't know if y'all have future topics. Just take a look at mine. I think Buddhism was the next one to kind of do a deeper dive into, as far as Four Noble Truths, which will be extremely practical and personal.
Yeah.
So
no, I think it's a good idea to just, we're still kind of hitting big chunks, right? It's we can go, we did a Christianity one. So yeah, we can kind of,
death was the topic today. We're still going broad.
It's a big one. That's a big one. Yeah.
Life and death. Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks guys.
Yeah. Good to see y'all.
Y'all too.
Yep.